If you have questions about my eyebrows, don't worry, I do too. Kik Messenger. Yeah, I've probably just triggered a lot of trauma for my fellow Gen Zers right there. But Kik Messenger is something where lots of people, especially older Gen Z, my generation, have absolute horror stories to share about this app. Now, lucky for me, I myself have never had the horror or perhaps misfortune of using this app. It was never really my scene. But what I can absolutely say after researching this video, that this app is an absolute cesspit and actually one of the worst ones I've ever come across in my Horrors of series. This one is genuinely the worst I've researched. Like, we've made lots of videos, I've gone through many different social media applications and talked about the genuine terrible things that have happened, and this one, without a doubt, is the worst. So before we get into this one, I want to give a huge trigger warning, as we are going to talk about topics of CSAM, child abduction, and even child. This video is certainly going to be one of my heavier ones where we're going to take a little bit more of a serious tone in this video because of how horrendous it is. But without further ado, let's just get into the topic and talk about the horrors of Kik Messenger. So if you're unfamiliar, we need to have a little bit of a deep dive into what Kik Messenger actually is if you haven't heard of it. Well, Kik was released back in October of 2010. Now, Kik Messenger and Kik, not to be confused with one another, by the way, because recently there is a streaming platform that is called Kik, however spelled K-I-C-K. Kik Messenger is just spelled K-I-K. And that's the one we're talking about today. But yeah, it's almost 15 years old, which is a little bit insane, but it was originally founded in 2009 by a group of students at the University of Waterloo in Canada. Now, they wanted to create new technology for smartphones, and Kik was originally supposed to be a music sharing app. However, it did soon transition into just your regular messaging app like WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. But what makes this one stick out? Why is this different? Well, we'll get into that, but I feel like it's important that you should know that within 15 days of Kik first launching, it reached 1 million user registrations. That is absolutely insane. But why? What made Kik stand out from all of the others? What made it so important? Well, the app ran off internet access rather than like data or text messages or anything like that. It was an internet-based messaging app, and you could send messages, photos, videos, mobile web pages, and other content just to a username. Now, Kik uses anonymity for messages, such as allowing users to register without the need to provide a telephone number or an email address. You can already see where this is going. It's a little bit like WhatsApp in the sense that it doesn't really imply end-to-end encryption. However, it's very, very secretive, and it is difficult for law enforcement to trace it most of the time, because what we're going to talk about in a little bit, some of the cases do have IP addresses that have been linked to them, but others, they genuinely cannot access it and they don't know who's behind certain things, if that makes sense. I don't really understand it. I'm not really a tech genius when it comes to like tracing and IP addresses or anything like that. I don't get it myself, so I'm just trying to explain it the dumbest version possible so you guys understand it in case you're in the same boat as me, okay? Okay. But I'd say like 60% of the time when law enforcement ask for specific information, Kik usually provides it, sometimes without the need of a court order, but most of the time a search warrant is required. And as of May 2016, Kik Messenger announced that they had approximately 300 million registered users and was used by approximately 40% of the United States teenagers, which is a horrendous statistic when we get onto the main bread and butter of this video. Now, I feel like it doesn't take a genius to work out why Kik Messenger is dangerous. Again, as mentioned previously, mostly used by teenagers, mostly completely anonymous. What could go wrong, you know? And of course, the first issue of Kik is that anonymity, because it makes it extremely easy for people to make fake profiles and to hide themselves, which opens up to scams, catfishing, and just straight up predatory behavior, you can get away with so much when your identity is completely hidden. And of course, the other issue being the teenagers, well, do I really need to explain why that's a problem? Probably not, but I'll do it anyway. Kik was actually marketed once as being a fun, lightweight, alternative to like text messaging, which of course attracts younger users. It was targeted to users of like Snapchat, like, you know, children that talk to their friends, you know? But of course, I've said it in every video and I'll say it again, where children and teenagers hang out, so do predators. That's just how it is. That's how it works. If there is something marketed for a young audience, you will find creepy adults that want to exploit the young children using it. And this case is no exception. In fact, this one is probably the blueprint of that, because there have been hundreds, maybe even thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands, actually. Let me scrap that. Let me try that again. There's probably been hundreds of thousands of cases of minors being targeted on Kik by predators. Kik also doesn't have an age verification process, which of course makes this even easier for predators to find young children to talk to. Now, law enforcement agencies all around the world have actually flagged Kik as being a hotspot for child exploitation cases, which is of course amplified by the notoriety of the app. Kik also has weak moderation and very limited parental controls, but being completely honest, children should not be allowed anywhere near this app. And I don't say that often, but this one for sure. Don't go near this one, guys. Now, conversations are encrypted in a way for them to be harder to monitor, but they're not completely encrypted. Parents and authorities sometimes have that problem of, you know, tracing the messages. And they have been known for being either reluctant or just slow at working with authorities. Now, when that comes to a case of a missing child, that's a big issue. But not only that, Kik is also notorious for things like sales or selling of illegal pictures, things of that nature. Everything goes down on this app. It's almost like if the dark web was put into an app that was somehow allowed on the surface web. That's how I would describe Kik. And again, even if we set aside the criminal aspects of Kik, the structure itself can be harmful, as there's group chats which can spiral into cyberbullying as it's all anonymous. The openness on the platform as a whole can expose its younger users to graphic and disturbing content without much warning. So before we get into the real life cases, Kik also has some like other controversies as well. But the point I said earlier about like the police in many different countries all around the world being aware of Kik, the problem is actually so notorious that Crimes Against Children Research Centre has specifically named Kik as one of the top platforms which has been used in child grooming cases that have occurred online. And a little bit more on the, you know, perhaps lack of law enforcement communication. Police forces have claimed that Kik has either been reluctant or slow to provide information for them when they ask for it. Because Kik accounts have fewer digital footprints, if you will. There's no phone number, there's no email address, there's not much to go off, just a username, which is, you know, difficult when you're trying to track down someone that's groomed a child or is selling. Kik has been used as a communication tool for extremist groups as well, which is not great when young teenagers who are, you know, easily manipulated or perhaps, you know, talked into things or don't have the critical thinking skills like adults do. That's a red flag. But in 2019, we almost had freedom. And I mean almost, but we didn't, unfortunately. It didn't happen because in 2019, the company actually announced that it would shut down after legal battles in the US with Securities and Exchange Commissions over its cryptocurrency, which was called KIN. That's right, this app that really doesn't care about like safety features or parental controls or anything like that, put the effort in to make a cryptocurrency. Are we shocked? No, not really. So Kik had raised money through an initial coin offering, which is also known as an ICO. I don't know what that is either. I don't really care enough to research it because all you need to know is it didn't happen anyway. But these regulators claimed that they violated security laws, but unfortunately Kik itself was actually saved by a holding company, but it just showed how reckless Kik well and truly was, chasing the trend of cryptocurrency while children were actually dying from using their app, and that's not an exaggeration, by the way. So I came across a good handful of cases while researching this video, and they are genuinely pretty horrendous, to say the least. Now, while I was researching this, I came across an article which was by the BBC, and the BBC said that Kik had been featured in more than 1,100 child cases in the last 5 years. And this article was posted in 2018. 29 police forces had supplied information to the BBC, and all but one had found Kik being involved in one of their cases. And lots of the police forces stated that Kik was, difficult to get information from, and it was why lots of these cases either ended up being swept under the rug, forgotten about, because by the time they got the information, it had been years. A constable in this article also said that he was investigating complex grooming cases involving more than 90 profiles. Some of these profiles were the suspected victims and others were the offenders, but he didn't have the information from Kik to be able to trace either of these. This article also goes on to explain that police officers that actually contact Kik for information are given an automated response and are directed to a complex legal process. And this is protected under the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, and this is how they gain a court order. So it's an absolute ball ache. Now, why they'd make it that difficult, I can't say, because surely you would give a shit about the children using your app, no? Now, Canada and the US have strict rules on releasing personal information to law enforcement agencies to protect individuals' privacies, which is fair, I guess. However, Kik itself has said that they will, quote, release some information if there is an imminent threat of death or serious physical injury to any person. But, as you're going to find out, that's bullshit. So the first case I came across was that of a man named Ryan Lawrence, and Ryan Lawrence was arrested in August of 2025 after being found in possession of CSAM and sending CSAM material through Kik Messenger. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what CSAM stands for, as we're going to, I should probably mention this now. From now on, instead of referring to things as CP, which we know as child porn, I will be referring to things as CSAM, which stands for Child Material, which is child porn, but child porn implies consent. So there's no consent when it comes to child porn, also known as CP, which is why CP will now be known to me, which the comment has pointed out, and I thank you for correcting me on this, will be referred to as CSAM. Just putting that out there to, clear up confusion. But the investigation began after Kik reported 42 files containing CSAM material. But on March 31st, 2025, police were granted a search warrant for the Kik account under the name of Brutus198504, and after this, authorities found 95 videos and 8 photos, and 79 of the videos were confirmed to include CSAM material. And one of the photographs was that of a white man, which was actually believed to be Ryan Lawrence himself partaking in CSAM, or, CA material. Not nice stuff. And it was using the law enforcement database that investigators were able to match the username to Ryan Wayne Lawrence. And his driver's license photo matched a photo which was obtained from the Kik account, and this ended up confirming his identity. But as of September 2025, this case is still ongoing and pending trial. Another case of this happening is that of 27-year-old Josh Fowler. Now, Josh Fowler actually was found messaging someone on Kik who he believed to be a 14-year-old girl in November and December of 2023. However, the girl thank God, was an undercover police officer and he was caught out. But the police officer who, was receiving these messages said that these messages were absolutely vile and disgusting and they were entirely, quotes, in nature. Fowler had also sent a video of him performing a in his home, and as well as sending nudes to the person who he thought was a 14-year-old girl. He also claimed in these messages that he adored teenage girls and loved to see teenagers in their school uniform. But in early 2024, Fowler was arrested and his phone was seized and analysed. It was found to contain indecent images of children, 1 Category C image and 5 Category A, which is the most severe images you can think of. Data on Joshua Fowler's phone also found that he was a member of numerous chats which were focused on sharing CSAM material. Alongside this, there were 4 extreme images of adults that were engaging in acts with animals. And when Josh was arrested and interviewed for this, horrendous crime, what do you think the answer he gave was? Well, he answered no comment to every single question given to him, which, I expect nothing less from a sicko like that. But he was actually released on bail pending further investigation and was due to be charged with the offences in November of 2024. However, when he was released on bail, what did he do? He did it again. He contacted another 14-year-old girl, which was also an undercover police officer. He did it again and got caught out by an undercover cop again. And again, the conversations became extremely sexual, with him trying to get the girl to perform a act. So, as you can imagine, they were quick to arrest him again, and he was charged and remanded in custody this time because he's a danger to young girls everywhere. He was charged with the offences including 2 counts of attempting to engage in communications with a child, attempting to incite/cause a girl to engage in activity, attempting to cause a child aged 13 to 15 to watch/look at an image of activity, and 2 counts of making indecent images of a child and possessing an extreme image. And all of these charges, horrendous charges as well, might I add, genuinely disgusting, the worst things I've ever heard. How long did he get in prison? 4 years. He'll probably only serve 2. Moving on. Another horrendous case of children being exploited through Kik is an article I found here about a Houston mother, a 42-year-old mother who filmed her 11-year-old daughter in the shower and uploaded it to Kik, or sent it into a Kik chat. The investigation began when the Centre for Missing and Exploited Children were alerted to a tip-off in November of 2024, and it flagged 46 images and videos which were believed to be of children. And police followed this trail, which eventually led them to this mother's house in Houston, Texas. Now, from this article, it didn't say a name, but this woman's house was searched in April of 2025, and the woman did agree to speak to police officers. However, she refused to give them her phone password, but it didn't matter anyway because police can get into your phone without the password. They have tools that do that for them. And they found several images and videos, including of her own daughter, and another photo showed the child with the woman in a compromising position. And because this case is very recent, the investigation is still very much ongoing, which is probably why they haven't released the mother's name. Could you imagine your own mother doing that to you and sharing videos of you in your most intimate moments? It's genuinely the worst thing I've ever heard, actually. Now, it's also believed that Kik was one of the messaging platform apps that was frequently used by now missing teenager Michaela Barley before she vanished. Michaela disappeared on the 12th of April 2016 from her home in Yorkton, Saskatchewan, Canada. And this case was pretty big. It's been talked about A lot, however, not enough. And despite several reported sightings, there have been no confirmed sightings or clues in where Michaela is today, nearly 10 years on. But Michaela was known for using many different apps to speak to like people online, strangers or online friends, and it's believed that Kik Messenger is one of the ones that she used as well. And police actually believe that she met someone off Kik, or someone from Kik was involved in Michaela's disappearance. However, because Kik is shit at providing police with any information, they can't confirm it. They're only going off what people have said and what they have gathered from Michaela's phone. Because throughout the day of her disappearance, Michaela was seen making several calls from her phone during the day in CCTV footage, and most of these calls were made on Kik. Police do know that. However, police have been unable to trace conversations due to the privacy laws. And to this day, Michaela's whereabouts are completely unknown. This next and final story I have for you guys features that of Nicole Lovell, who was 13 years old when she was murdered in 2016 by someone she met on Kik. Nicole snuck out of her house after being lured by an 18-year-old man named David Eisenhower, and he was a college student that she had been speaking to on Kik. And David Eisenhower, instead of, cutting off conversation and at least, owning up to taking some accountability for being an absolute weirdo, he and a friend ended up killing Nicole to cover up the relationship. But for months before this, Nicole was groomed by David through Kik, who presented himself as the trustworthy boy next door who truly cared about her. And in January of 2016, David convinced her to sneak out of her house, and she did so, taking her minion blanket comforter with her, which to me just proves the age, the age difference, which is even more heartbreaking. But David didn't act alone. He said he enlisted the help of a woman named Natalie Keepers to help with the crime. Once Nicole had met him, David then ended up killing her because he feared this relationship getting out would ruin his future, but killing her wouldn't. Whereas Natalie Keepers actually said that she helped dispose of Nicole's body. The case was absolutely horrific, and not only because Nicole was so young, just 13 years old, but because of the whole of this happened on Kik, an app that her parents didn't even know existed. Police and prosecutors emphasised that David Eisenhower's used Kik's anonymity to groom Nicole without detection, and that Kik had become a common thread in cases where predators were targeting young children and teenagers. David was sentenced to 50 years in prison, and Natalie was sentenced to 40. However, she had 20 suspended, meaning that she will serve 20 years behind bars. So, what now? Well, if you're a parent or you are someone who knows young children that have phones, whether you're an auntie, an uncle, a grandparent, a family friend, you need to, and I cannot stress this enough, keep them off this app. Do everything you can to make sure your children do not have Kik. I mean it, genuinely. This is the one thing. Keep them away from it. I have researched so many social media apps and covered them and talked about them in this format. This is by far the worst one I have ever looked into. Genuinely, Kik Messenger should have been shut down in 2019. In fact, it should have never even existed. And this is just a handful of the cases that I have come across and talked to you about. There are hundreds, thousands, maybe even more than that get swept under the rug. I bet so many of you watching this video have your own horror stories about Kik Messenger, and I want to hear them in the comments, please. There are hundreds of Reddit threads and comment threads of people talking about their worst experiences. There is absolutely nothing good that has come from using Kik. Nothing. Now, I am not trying to scaremonger. If you guys watch my videos, you guys know that I'm pretty kids are okay on this app. Just make sure you keep a really close eye on them. But this one, genuinely, stay away from it. If you're a young child watching this app, stay away from it. Please. Law enforcement agencies around the world have repeatedly warned parents about Kik's role in child exploitation and CSAM material and sales and everything you can imagine. to the point where murders have happened because of Kik. And even aside from the worst crimes that have occurred on this platform, the group chat aspect, the anonymity, the bullying, the content, the illegal activity, all of it can be accessed with minimal effort. I stand by my point of saying this is like the dark web, but on the surface, as a little app on your phone. All in all, in my humble little dollface opinion, I believe this cesspit should have been wiped off the face of the earth a very long time ago. Unfortunately, that is all the time I have for this video. If you enjoyed, please let me know. If you have any of your own case requests, please send them to me over Instagram or email, as the comments are getting swamped at the minute and I'm struggling to read them all and I don't want to miss your ideas. But if you want to follow me on any of the social medias, the links are down below in my description, so please go ahead and do that, as that would be greatly appreciated. You get updates on videos, Q&As, whatever, all that good stuff. And if you would like to subscribe, that would also be amazing, but if not, that's also absolutely fine, because regardless, I hope to see you in the next video anyway. Stay safe.